Jacob was born into a legacy unlike any other. He was the son of Isaac, the grandson of Abraham, heirs to a covenant that promised nations, blessing, and divine purpose. From the moment he entered the world, clutching his twin brother's heel, his life seemed destined for conflict. His very name whispered of striving, grasping, reaching for what lay just beyond his grasp. Growing up, Jacob lived in the shadow of rivalry. Esau was strong and favored by their father. Jacob was quiet, thoughtful, and deeply influenced by his mother. One day, driven by fear and ambition, he deceived his blind father and stole the blessing meant for his brother. That single act shattered. Esau's anger burned hot, and Jacob fled into exile, carrying both the blessing of God and the burden of guilt. And far from home, in his uncle's house, Jacob tasted the consequences of deception. He who had tricked was now tricked. He labored for years, loved deeply, suffered betrayal, and learned patience the hard way. Yet even in his wandering, God did not abandon him. One night, alone in the wilderness, Jacob dreamed of a ladder reaching from earth to heaven, and he heard God reaffirm the ancient promise. His descendants would be countless, and God would walk with him wherever he went. 10 years later, when Jacob finally turned toward home, fear gripped his heart. Esau was waiting, the past was waiting, and on the night before their meeting, Jacob wrestled with a mysterious stranger until dawn. It was more than a physical struggle. It was Jacob wrestling with his past, his identity, his destiny. When the night ended, he limped away with a blessing and a new name, Israel, one who struggles with God. The deceiver had become a seeker. The runner had become a man of faith. And from this transformed man came 12 sons, 12 lives, 12 stories, 12 threads woven into the fabric of a nation. They were born into a complicated household, 2 wives, 2 maidservants. Rivalry, jealousy, longing, and heartbreak filled their home. Each mother fought for love. Each son grew up seeking approval, and in that emotional storm, their characters were formed. Named Reuben, the firstborn seemed destined for greatness. He carried the weight of expectation, the promise of leadership. At times, he showed responsibility, even trying to protect Joseph from death. But one reckless act, betraying his father's trust, destroyed his future. His strength dissolved into instability. His story became one of lost potential, a reminder that privilege without character cannot endure. Simeon burned with anger. When his sister was dishonored, he answered injustice with massacre. His rage felt righteous to him, but it stained his family forever. Later, he joined in betraying Joseph. Again and again, his temper ruled him. His life became a warning about what happens when emotion replaces wisdom. Levi walked the same violent path at first. He stood beside Simeon in bloodshed. His zeal was fierce, his loyalty unquestioned, but uncontrolled. Jacob condemned his anger, predicting that his descendants would be scattered. Yet generations later, that same passion was redeemed. When Israel turned to idolatry, Levi's descendants stood for God. Their fire was purified. They became priests and teachers. What once destroyed now served. His legacy became proof that God can transform even the most dangerous passion into holy purpose. Judah's story was different. He began in compromise. He helped sell Joseph. He lived with lies. He failed his daughter-in-law Tamar and nearly destroyed her life. But when confronted with his own hypocrisy, Judah did something rare. He confessed. He humbled himself. He changed. Years later, when Benjamin's life was in danger, Judah stepped forward and offered himself as a substitute. The man who once sold his brother now offered his own freedom to save one. In that moment, Judah became a leader, a lion, a protector. From his line would come kings, and one day, the Messiah, Dan, was named with hope. God has judged. Yet his legacy grew dark. His tribe drifted into deception and idolatry. Power without faith became poison. His story reminds us that calling alone is not enough. Integrity must walk beside it. Naphtali moved differently. Free, graceful, gentle, his life was not marked by scandal or dominance, but by beauty and expression. His descendants reflected that same spirit. Swift, eloquent, resilient. Not every hero fights with swords. Some shape history through wisdom and grace. Gad was born into hardship and grew into strength. Living on the borderlands, always vulnerable, his people became warriors of endurance. Attacked, yet unbroken. Pressed, yet victorious. His legacy is perseverance. Asher walked in abundance. His land overflowed with oil and grain. His people provided for others. His story teaches that prosperity, when paired with gratitude, can be a blessing rather than a snare. Issachar loved stability. Strong and hardworking, his tribe carried burdens faithfully. They valued peace over conquest. Sometimes that led to compromise, but it also produced wisdom. They became people who understood the times and guided others with insight. Zebulun looked outward, toward the sea, toward trade, toward connection. His people became merchants and explorers, linking Israel to the wider world. They balanced Issachar's quiet labor with bold enterprise. Then there was Joseph, and born of Rachel, deeply loved, wrapped in favor. Joseph stood out from childhood. His dreams pointed to greatness, but his words stirred jealousy. His coat became a target. His brother's hatred boiled over, and he was sold like merchandise, stripped of dignity, carried into Egypt as a slave. Bound. But Joseph never abandoned his faith. He served faithfully in Potiphar's house. He resisted temptation. He was falsely accused. Thrown into prison, forgotten, yet even in darkness God was working. Years later, his gift opened palace doors. In one day, he rose from prisoner to governor. He prepared Egypt for famine. He saved nations. Go, and when his brothers bowed before him, just as his dreams had foretold, Joseph faced a choice, revenge, or grace. Man, he chose grace. You meant it for evil, he told them. But God meant it for good. His forgiveness healed a family. His faith preserved a people. His life became a living testimony that suffering is never wasted in God's hands. Finally, there was Benjamin. Born in sorrow, named in hope, raised in protection, he became his father's treasure after Joseph's disappearance. Innocent of past sins, he represented a second chance. When his life was threatened in Egypt, the brothers proved they had changed. They no longer sacrificed the weak. They protected him, and through Benjamin, Joseph revealed himself. Through Benjamin, reconciliation came. The youngest became the bridge. Through these 12 men, flawed, passionate, broken, redeemed, God built a nation. Some failed loudly. Some grew quietly. Some burned with anger. Some shone with compassion. Some stumbled. Some rose. Yet none were wasted. Plan their stories remind us that God does not wait for perfect people. He works with real ones, with wounded ones, with repentant ones, with those willing to grow. In their lives we see ourselves, we see lost potential, we see second chances, we see stubborn pride, we see transforming grace, we see fear, we see faith, we see betrayal, we see no. And as their journey continues, as their descendants rise and fall, as the covenant unfolds through generations, we begin to realize that this story is not only about 12 brothers. It is about how God takes fractured families, broken hearts, and imperfect lives, and patiently weaves them into something eternal. And this is only the beginning, because the story of these 12 sons does not end with their reunion in Egypt, nor with their father's final. In many ways, that was only the doorway into something far greater. Bonds. When Jacob grew old and felt his strength fading, He gathered his sons around his bed. The years of struggle were etched into his face. His voice carried the weight of memory, of love and loss, of betrayal and forgiveness, of promises whispered by God in lonely places. One by one, he spoke over his children, not only as a father, but as a prophet. His words were not merely blessings, they were windows into the future. And he spoke of Reuben's instability, of Simeon and Levi's fierce anger, of Judah's rising strength. He described Joseph as a fruitful vine, stretching beyond walls, nourished by unseen springs. He called Benjamin a fierce wolf, strong and resilient. Each word planted seeds that would grow for centuries. And when Jacob finally breathed his last, a chapter closed, but another opened. Whoop! His sons carried his body back to Canaan, walking together in sorrow, bound by shared memory. The same brothers who once stood divided by jealousy now stood united by loss. They buried their father in the land promised to their ancestors, in the cave where Abraham and Isaac rested. In that quiet place, surrounded by dust and tears, they remembered who they were. They were no longer just brothers. Tamund. They were the fathers of a nation. After Jacob's death, fear crept back into their hearts. Old guilt resurfaced. Old memories whispered, what if Joseph had only spared them for their father's sake? What if now he would take revenge? So they sent word to him, trembling, asking for mercy. Abandoned Joseph wept when he heard their message. Do not be afraid, he said. Am I in the place of God? You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. Those words became the foundation of their future. Not bitterness, not vengeance, grace. Under Joseph's protection, the family settled in Egypt. They grew, they multiplied. What began as 12 sons became hundreds, then thousands, then a multitude. The promise spoken to Abraham under starlit skies was quietly unfolding, but time passed, Joseph died, a new generation arose. No, and Egypt forgot. The descendants of Jacob, once welcomed guests, became feared outsiders. The nation that had been preserved through Joseph's wisdom was now enslaved by Pharaoh's cruelty. Chains replaced favor. Whips replaced hospitality. Whips replaced hospitality. Bricks replaced dreams. Yet even in bondage, God was still weaving his story. Benjamin, from the tribe of Levi, the tribe once marked by violence, came a child named Moses, hidden in a basket, drawn from water, raised in a palace, called in the desert. Through him, God would confront kings, part seas, and lead Israel toward freedom. And from Judah's line would come David, a shepherd boy who became king, a poet, a warrior, a man after God's heart. Through David's descendants, the promise of a righteous ruler would grow stronger. And from Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, would come leaders and warriors who would shape the northern tribes. From Benjamin would arise Saul, Israel's first king, fierce and complex. From Issachar would come wise counselors. And from Zebulun, traders and explorers. From Gad, border defenders. From Asher, providers of abundance. From Naphtali, swift messengers. Jans from Dan, cautionary tales of compromise. Generation after generation, the patterns continued. Strength and weakness, faith and failure. Dan obedience and rebellion, again and again Israel would rise and fall. They would conquer lands, then lose them, and build temples, then abandon them, sing psalms, then bow to idols, cry out for help, then forget. And yet every time they wandered, God pursued. Every time they broke the covenant, God renewed it. And every time darkness grew thick, he sent light. Imperfects arose to remind them of who they were, the children of promise, born from 12 brothers who once hated one another, but learned, slowly, painfully, how to walk in grace. And then, in the fullness of time, from the line of Judah, in a small town called Bethlehem, a child was born. Mimdi, a descendant of Jacob, a son of Abraham, a fulfillment of centuries of longing. He carried within him the story of all 12 tribes, Reuben's lost potential, Simeon's anger, Levi's zeal, Judah's repentance, Joseph's suffering, Benjamin's vulnerability, all of it converged in him. Where they had failed, he would succeed. Where they had broken trust, he would restore it. Where they had sinned, he would redeem. He would gather the scattered, heal the divided, restore the broken. And invite the world into the covenant, first whispered to a wandering man named Jacob. So when we look back at those 12 sons, arguing in tents, herding sheep under burning suns, plotting in shadows, weeping in reconciliation, we are not just reading ancient history, we are reading the beginning of a story that still continues. A story about families and failures, about jealousy and forgiveness, about discipline and grace, about a God who refuses to give up on his people. A God who takes imperfect lives and turns them into living testimonies. And somewhere in that story, your story fits too, because just like them, you carry both weakness and potential. And just like them, you have moments of fear and moments of faith. Just like them, you have chapters you wish you could rewrite. And just like them, you are not finished yet. The same God who walked with Jacob in the wilderness, who lifted Joseph from prison, who transformed Judah's heart, who redeemed Levi's legacy, is still writing, still shaping, still calling. And this journey, this unfolding story of grace, purpose, and redemption is far from over. Because even after the last page of Scripture seems to close, the story itself never truly ends. It moves forward through generations, through cities and deserts, through empires and revolutions, through quiet prayers whispered in bedrooms and desperate cries lifted from hospital rooms and prison cells. On the same promise that began with Abraham's trembling faith, continued through Jacob's restless nights, burned in Moses' encounters with God, and echoed in David's songs, found its fullest voice in Jesus Christ. He did not come as a conqueror with armies. He came as a child in weakness. He did not build a palace. He walked dusty roads. He did not gather power. He gave his life. Where kings had failed, he remained faithful. Where priests had grown cold, he burned with compassion. And where people had lost hope, he restored it. Through him, the scattered tribes were no longer just a nation of blood and borders, but a family of faith, drawn from every language, every culture, every broken past. Fishermen became witnesses, tax collectors became disciples, outcasts became heirs, sinners became sons and daughters, and the story spread. From Jerusalem to Rome, from deserts to oceans, from scrolls to books, from whispered prayers to roaring cathedrals. Empires rose and fell, kingdoms collapsed, borders shifted, but the message endured, that God still seeks, still saves, still heals. Still restores, that no failure is final, no past is too dark, no wound is too deep. And just as he once took 12 flawed brothers and shaped them into a nation, he now takes countless flawed hearts and shapes them into something holy. And maybe that is the most astonishing part of all. Not that God worked in ancient times, but that he still works now, in your doubts, in your prayers, in your struggles. In your quiet moments, when you wonder if your life really matters. It does. Because you are not an accident in this story. You are a chapter. Your pain is not wasted. Your waiting is not forgotten. Your tears are not ignored. Just as Joseph's prison led to a palace. Just as Judah's shame led to leadership. Just as Israel's exile led to restoration. Means your hardships are shaping something you cannot yet see. Sometimes God writes his greatest victories in invisible ink. Omjin, you only understand them later, years later, looking back, seeing how every closed door redirected you. Every loss refined you. Danged. Every delay prepared you. Every failure humbled you. Every prayer changed you. And one day you will realize that what felt like chaos was actually choreography. Means that what felt like silence was actually shaping, that what felt like abandonment was actually protection. Demiurgus. So when your faith feels weak, remember Jacob wrestling in the night. When your hope feels distant, remember Joseph in chains. When your courage feels small, remember David before Goliath. When your heart feels broken, remember the cross and the empty tomb, because resurrection is woven into this story. New beginnings are its language. Redemption is its rhythm. Grace is its heartbeat. You are part of a story that began before you were born. And will continue long after you are gone. A story written by a God who specializes in restoration. Dumba's a God who turns ashes into beauty, mourning into joy, fear into faith, and ordinary lives into eternal testimonies. Demdians. So do not give up, do not grow weary. Blind, do not believe the lie that your best days are behind you. Chembiat. Temedidad. If God is still breathing life into your lungs, if he is still stirring your heart, if he is still whispering your name, then he is not finished, not with Israel, not with the world. Not with you. And somewhere, beyond what you can see right now, another chapter is already being written. Dan's one, filled with purpose, with healing, with light, with hope. And this story, your story, Chamdio is only just beginning, because even when the words seem to fade, the voice of the story keeps echoing in the quiet places of your life. It speaks when the night feels long, when prayers feel unanswered, when dreams feel delayed. Dan's when your heart feels tired of hoping, it whispers, this is not the end. It reminds you that every great chapter in this story was once a season of waiting. Abraham waited for a son. Joseph waited in chains. Moses waited in exile. David waited in caves. Israel waited in captivity. And yet, in every delay, God was preparing something greater than they imagined. Waiting was never wasted. Neither is yours. Shanda. Sometimes we think faith is loud, that it always looks like miracles and victories and mountains moving, dawned. But more often, faith looks like waking up again after disappointment, praying again after silence, trusting again after betrayal, trying again after failure. Faith is choosing to believe that God is working, even when you cannot see his hands. Pliminda. It is believing that roots are growing underground before flowers ever appear. And maybe right now you are in that hidden season where nothing seems to be happening, where progress feels slow, where answers feel far away. But this story reminds us, hidden does not mean forgotten. Delayed does not mean denied. Broken does not mean finished. Every scar you carry is evidence that you survived. Every tear you cried was seen. Every prayer you whispered was heard. Every step you took in darkness mattered. And because God does not waste pain, he transforms it. He turns wounds into wisdom, loss into compassion, failure into humility, fear into courage. And slowly, quietly, he builds in you a strength you never asked for, but will one day be grateful to have. One day you will look back and realize that season that almost broke you, built you, Mondia, that moment that nearly ended you, redefined you, that loss you never understood, real-dected you, that silence you hated. Jens taught you how to listen, that weakness you feared, entreated you to grace. This is how the story works. Manja not in straight lines, not in perfect patterns, but in redemption, in restoration, in unexpected beauty rising from ashes. And just like the 12 brothers could never imagine what their family would become, you cannot yet imagine what God is forming through your life. Your obedience today is shaping generations tomorrow. Your prayers are planting seeds you may never see bloom. Your faithfulness in small things is echoing into eternity. Made you matter more than you know. Your life carries weight. Your choices carry meaning. Your story carries purpose. And one day when you stand on the other side of your struggles, when healing has replaced heartbreak, and when peace has replaced panic, when clarity has replaced confusion, you will see it. Planned. You will see how every thread, light and dark, was woven into something beautiful. You will see that God was never late, never absent, never careless. He was intentional, patient, faithful, all along. So keep walking. Even when the road feels lonely, keep believing. Even when doubts grow loud, keep praying. Even when answers delay, keep loving. Even when you've been hurt, keep hoping. Even when hope feels fragile, clean. Because this story has always been about perseverance, about grace, about mercy, about second chances, about new beginnings. And as long as you are breathing, as long as your heart is still seeking, as long as your spirit is still reaching, God is still writing, still shaping, still redeeming, still calling you forward. And not backward, not into regret, not into fear, but into purpose, into healing, into light, into life. And somewhere ahead of you, beyond this chapter, beyond this struggle, beyond this season, a new page is waiting, and frill with joy you haven't felt yet, peace you haven't known yet, strength you haven't discovered yet, and testimony you haven't shared yet. So rise again, trust again, hope again, believe again. Because this story, your story, is far from finished.